Hey guys, welcome to Storytime with Jester. Tonight we will be concluding the reading of the Book of Prophecies. We'll pick up where we left off last week at chapter 92. Ulrich, Redeem, and Griffin entered the giant throne room where Red and the two dwarves had lost their lives. After rescuing Griffin from the clutches of the succubi, the trio fought their way through hordes of undead, Ulrich's Sunblade forging their path to reach this, their final destination. The room had changed drastically since Griffin's last visit. The main floor and that of the first tier were checkered red and black. A large bone throne dominated the center of the top tier, the silver pool just in front of it. Seated on the throne was the large ram-headed demon Griffin had witnessed being summoned by the goat-headed priests. Ulrich didn't hesitate. He ran straight for the closest set of stairs, his body glowing with the radiance of Finian as he channeled his deity's power. Ulrich's charge was short-lived, however, as he suddenly started rising off the ground, levitating at a tremendous speed. His upward fall was courtesy of the demon to which he had intended to be the first to fall to his glowing blade. Griffin, seeing Ulrich suddenly blast off, used his power of transference to swap Ulrich and Redeem. Ulrich now appeared on the bottom floor of the throne room, while Redeem suddenly found himself falling upward. Redeem concentrated, changing his body's density to that of a feather, immediately stopping the rapidity of his ascent to the ceiling above. Griffin, who had activated his ring as they had entered the throne room, disappeared, reappearing a short distance away. Redeem escaped the now harmless fall by casting a spell that caused him to appear behind the closest demon. His sudden appearance caused the demon to create multiple images of himself, which appeared all around him. Before Redeem could react, he disappeared, Griffin taking his place and Redeem appearing where Griffin just was. Griffin attacked the now 6 clustered demons with his sword. His metabolism was sped up due to a spell Redeem had cast on all of them prior to entering the throne room. As a result, his blade flew in a flurry of strokes and thrusts. 2 of the images disappeared, and his blade found purchase on the real demon. Before the demon could counter, Griffin had disappeared again, his ring placing him several feet away towards the guardian of the center stairs. Ulrich, confused and not used to the tactics and powers Griffin employed, caused a pair of wings to appear on his back, and he took to the air, this time on his own accord. As he reached a height of about 80 feet, he could see the ram-headed demon, its bloated body sitting on the throne, a spectator to the battle below. A wide grin showing a mouth full of teeth stretched across its face as it watched on with a sadistic gleam in its orange eyes. Flames lapped and flickered all over its body as if it would combust at any moment. Ulrich reached the apex of his ascension after but 10 more feet, then dived straight at the demon furthest away. With his comrades out of harm's way, Redeem unleashed a spell at the demon and the 3 images. 4 tiny meteors streaked at the 4 demons and struck them square in the chest. Immediately the 3 images vanished, leaving the real demon exposed. The guardian of the center stairs met Griffin's challenge head-on. The 2 attacked each other in similar fashion, Griffin with his blade slashing and thrusting with a fury, and the demon biting and clawing and trying to grab Griffin with its 2 pincers. By the time Griffin's ring took effect, placing him 10 feet away, both combatants were bleeding from the multiple wounds each received from the other. Redeem could feel his mind being assaulted. He used his own powers of mind over body to attempt to block the demon's attack. Sensing he was about to fail, he shifted his power to make his body insubstantial, ghost-like. He was correct in his assessment, for as his body faded, the demon took control of his mind. As Ulrich neared the 3rd demon, it spoke a word in a dark, foul language. A wave of force struck Ulrich, stunning him and knocking him out of the air. His wings folded in, and he crashed, his limp body coming to a halt at the edge of the tier. As the demon stalked toward its fallen prey, it suddenly disappeared, Griffin appearing where it previously stood. The demon reappeared near the 2nd demon. Griffin stood in front of Ulrich's body, his sword raised in defense. As the 2 demons approached Griffin, he charged them. His blade slashed at them, opening up wounds on both as one managed to grasp him in its pincer. Griffin didn't stay grappled for long, as he disappeared and reappeared behind them. As they turned to face him, Ulrich recovered his senses. He spoke words of power, and his body was filled with the radiance of Finian. Hearing him speak, one of the demons turned his way, leaving the other to face Griffin. The first demon, which had incapacitated Redeem, came upon Griffin from behind. As the two converged on him, he again disappeared, the third demon appearing in his place while he reappeared next to Ulrich. Ulrich then called down holy fire on the clustered demons in a column of flame. The ram-horned demon on the throne rose to his feet as two of the flame-engulfed demons collapsed in a burning heap on the floor. The third demon walked out of the flames only singed, its fur smoldering. Released from the mind control effect by the death of his controller, Redeem disappeared and reappeared inside the demon's body, his own now the hardness of adamantine as he controlled his molecules. The result was the instantaneous death of the third demon. Redeem then changed his form to be insubstantial and simply walked out of the demon's body, the latter dropping to the floor. The trio then turned to face the ram-horned demon that was looking down on them from above. With a huge sword in one hand and a green skull-topped mace in the other, the bloated demon burst into flame on his own volition. Redeem looked at Ulrich and in a hollow voice said, "We got you this far. He's all yours." Chapter 93. The raven-haired woman screamed in pain as the contractions came again. "It is almost time," the midwife said. Several doulas scurried about, seeing to the needs of the expectant mother, while one stayed nearby to comfort her when the time came. Outside, the husband and soon-to-be father was pacing back and forth, sweat pouring down his face. "One would think, Your Majesty, that it was you who was laboring with child," said the only other person in the room. The king stopped dead in his tracks and glared at the elf, who in turn gave a sly smile. For a moment the king looked on, stone-faced. He then burst into laughter and put a hand on the elf's shoulder that joined in his mirth. "Arundriel, old friend, you always did know how to make me laugh," the king said. Just then the midwife came into the room. The king's mood halted as he awaited the news. He was a fierce warrior, battle-hardy. He had defeated many a foe on the battlefield, but was completely unprepared for the wash of emotions that assaulted his mind at this time. "You have a son!" the midwife exclaimed. "Natasa?" the king inquired of his wife. "The queen is fine. And the healthy. You can go see them," she added, seeing how unaccustomed to these things the king was, this being his firstborn. The king smiled with excitement as he burst into the room where his wife and son awaited. The queen held the swaddled child close to her bosom. Her face beamed with pride as the king looked upon her. She turned the baby toward him so he could look upon the face of his son. "Say hello to Prince Gregor," she said. A delegation from the Elven kingdom came to see the new prince of Dacia. The Dacian banners flew in the wind, howling like packs of wolves as the delegation approached. The elves were arrayed in all of their finery and entered the throne room bearing gifts for the child. The king's friend, Arundriel, was part of this delegation, as was the last to present the prince with a gift. He handed his attendant an ornately carved box. It was small in size, being no more than 18 inches in length and a third that in width. He unlatched the clasp and lifted the lid. Inside the box, on purple velvet, lay a dagger fashioned from the horn of a unicorn. It was expertly crafted, a work of art. Arundriel took the dagger and, placing it in both palms, turned to the queen. "Queen Natasa, words cannot express our gratitude for the friendship our kingdoms share. Your purity of heart has charmed your king, your people, and those of the forest, both elven and creature alike. This gift I present to you this day is rare, the only of its kind. It was freely given by that which we elves hold sacred, for it represents all that is good in the world. May this forever be a token of our friendship." Queen Natasa took the dagger with heartfelt thanks. When the festivities were over and everyone had left, she took the dagger and hung it beside her personal banner, a unicorn head on a field of purple. Varag stood there staring at the broken wall that once held her standard. Her hand unconsciously reached for her hip where the unicorn horn dagger was. Her hand recoiled when it was but inches from the dagger, the nerves remembering the pain they suffered the last time she grasped it. She began trembling, but not from the memory of that pain, rather the pain from the memories of time past, a time when she was happy, a time when all was right with the world, a time before doom. Suddenly, as if just her memory alone was enough to summon, a loud fluttering sound arose outside, breaking the heretofore silence. Pantera drew his sword, preparing to protect his mother from whatever threat was approaching. He had fought many battles against all manner of creatures, but was unprepared for the swiftness of this attack. Hundreds of bats swooped into the room, knocking Pantera to the stone floor and swarming around Varag like a mini tornado. Wounds started appearing all over her body as hundreds of tiny teeth bit at her flesh as they continued their conical flight. Varag, like her son, was unprepared. She had intended to draw Doom out, to unleash upon him all the power her centuries of study in the arts of magic had given her. All she could do right now, however, was reach for the dagger she had hoped to bequeath to Pedius, the dagger that was to be wielded by her own blood to finish what she failed to do centuries ago, the dagger that she now grasped through intense pain, to attempt to ward off the attacks and perhaps stab the one that represented Doom's heart. Instead, she collapsed to the floor in a bloody heap, the dagger loosened from her grip and landing nearby as the bat swarm moved toward the now rising Pantera. Instead of swarming him as it had done Varag, the colony of bats began forming into the image of Doom. As the transformation was complete, Pantera was on his feet, sword in hand. Chapter 94. As Andor's body disappeared, the force of the staff exploding caused the cracks in the earth to suddenly burst to life again as they continued to their targets. The ground beneath the feet of Doom's purple-robed high priests opened up, sending them spiraling downwards. As they disappeared into the bowels of the earth, the center of the army of the dead all fell down as one, as their creation was the direct result of the existence of the high priests. The remainder of the army continued fighting as there were still life forces to snuff out, but did so without any direction. With the high priests and the strongest of the undead army out of the picture, the combined forces of Varag and Folkreach began to decimate the rest. The infantries continued their assault while the cavalries circled the melee and began working their way inward. As Prince Thomas neared the center of the melee, he noticed a familiar figure lying on the ground. He dismounted and fought his way to the body of his father, the king. Through the swirling mist, Andor looked on as Doom grabbed Pantera by the throat and lifted his hulking frame off the ground as if it were a child's toy. Pantera struggled to breathe as he dropped his sword and shield and used both hands to try and loosen the grip Doom had on him. Varag lay on the floor, barely clinging to life, unable to come to her son's aid. For all the power she possessed, Doom left her broken and impotent in one fell attack. Andor knew what he must do. When he was certain all of Doom's attention was focused on Pantera, he materialized next to Varag. Kneeling down beside her, he leaned in, his face to hers, and whispered something. Her eyes fluttered softly open and looked into his, as she nodded in affirmation. Andor reached next to her and picked up the unicorn horn dagger. Grasping it in both hands, he lifted it high above his head. In one swift motion, he plunged the dagger into the heart of Varag. As her blood mingled with the blade, Andor once again activated his armor, and he and the dagger faded from view. Oblivious to what was taking place behind him, Doom continued his assault on Pantera, his taloned claws penetrating Pantera's neck, as intense cold emanated from his body. Given his undead state, Pantera was unaffected by the cold, but he was quickly succumbing to Doom's unnatural strength. The centuries of Varag's existence caught up to her as her beautiful form violently aged in a matter of seconds, until she was no more than the dust from whence she came. This did not go unnoticed by Doom. With Pantera still firmly in his grasp, he turned to look at his nemesis in her death throes. As he did so, Andor materialized behind him in the air and plunged the dagger into where he hoped Doom's heart to be, and then dropped the remaining few feet to the ground. He then faded from view once again as Doom's body shuddered, the dagger indeed having found the inky blackness that was Doom's heart. As Doom twitched, the temperature in the room quickly plunged to sub-zero. Pantera took his sword in both hands, and, as Doom fell to his knees, decapitated him in one powerful swing. As Doom's ghastly head tumbled to the floor, Pantera sheathed his sword and began walking away. As he came to the edge of the room, he stretched forth a hand and uttered something in a foul language. The area around Doom's head and body exploded in a ball of flame, engulfing the Scourge of the world until there was nothing left. Satisfied that the destruction of Doom was complete, Pantera turned and left the building. Chapter 95. A group of knights formed a protective circle around Prince and King as Thomas removed Friedrich's helm. 200 of the undead lie all around the king, attesting to his prowess in battle, his sword still gripped tightly in his hand. As Thomas looked into his eyes, he was greeted only by a cold, blank stare. All around the knights, the battle was coming to an end. The combined forces had succeeded in putting down the plague of the undead. As the last of these horrors were being put to the sword, a dark figure was approaching from the west in the air, mounted on some sort of flying steed whose appearance was just as dark as its rider, but whose fiery hooves were blazing a trail across the sky. Thomas closed the eyes of his father and stood up, sword drawn, ready to meet this new threat. As horse and rider landed, the remnant of Varag's army began beating their shields with weapons and chanting a guttural "Harumph!" The rider dismounted the beast from hell and approached the circle of knights, his weapons sheathed. "Pantera!" Thomas called as he stepped out of the protective circle of knights and approached his horrifying brother. "It is finished," Pantera announced. "Doom is no more. Let us return to our lands and rest. Another enemy awaits us from the north." The armies of Rurik and Vanik fought valiantly against the undead menace that had so quickly overrun Ruz and Crane. Unlike the army of the dead from the east, who flocked behind the banner of Doom and his lich high priests, these monstrosities gained their power from another source, one that was doing battle with a certain priest of Finian as they pressed onward toward the two tiny states. The brave defenders stood their ground, defiant against the onslaught of abominations that threatened the existence of all they held dear. Just when it seemed they could hold on no longer, something shifted. The hordes of undead seemed to wane in their attack, as if there was a rift in their power source. The defenders quickly found themselves to be on the offensive as the undead army started to break apart. Also, at this time, the returning armies of Pantera and Thomas joined the battle, as the undead had managed to advance deep into Rurik and was in their path homeward. Their unexpected presence was the breaking point. The vile creatures were put to the sword, and those that managed to escape the battlefield were hunted down so that no innocent civilian would fall prey to their evil. Chapter 96. When Doom's conflagrant body was no more, the unicorn horn dagger fell to the charred floor, singed but intact. For a moment it just rested there, and then a wrinkled hand reached down and picked it up. Seconds later, both the hand and dagger disappeared, leaving the ancient room empty once again. The end. Well, friends, I hope you enjoyed my reading of my novel, The Book of Prophecies. I thank you immensely for sticking with me until the very end, and these videos are available to go back and revisit at your leisure, and make sure you share with all your friends so they can enjoy the reading of my book as well. Also, make sure you hit the like, subscribe, and notification bell if you're not already subscribed to my channel, and The way you can also help support this channel, because this book is not the only book I'll be reading. I've also read from Sherlock Holmes, and I'll be reading more from that, from Sherlock Holmes and other novels. So the way you can support this channel is by purchasing the book I just read, Book of Prophecies. It's available in hardback, paperback, and ebook formats. You can find links to each of those in the About section of this channel. You can also find those same links in the About section of my Facebook page, James Richmond Author. So, again, friends, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, and as always, see you soon.